Hi, I'm Jim. I'm a narcissist. I have narcissistic personality disorder. Making these videos just as a first-hand account of what it's been like for me, my journey, So anybody that's really looking to gain any type of information into this disorder, of course, you're more than welcome to watch. Don't hesitate to reach out with questions. One of the symptoms is, of course, glory hounding. So I won't be a traditional YouTuber, so I won't beg and plead that you like these videos. I won't beg and plead that you subscribe. I try my best to not even look if anybody's viewing, because that's a trigger for me that of course I'm trying to avoid. So yeah, if you're looking to gain any kind of information, I hope that you can find these videos helpful. And today's going to be an intense one, to the point where I brought tissues. I expect to cry a lot. So yeah, I'm already getting emotional. I'm gonna share some stories about some of the things I've done, and I'm gonna share them to be accountable. First, nobody that I know knows I make these videos, right? So I haven't told anyone. I've told one person. My therapist knows that I make these videos, but at that point, actually, I would love it if he watched them. I mean, that'd be almost like free therapy, giving him information. But no, I have not told anybody else that I, in any way, shape, or form, that I make these videos. So for me, my videos are about two things. First, trying to be helpful in any way, shape, or form that I can, to anybody that either has this disease, thinks they may have this disease, or somebody that thinks they know somebody that has this disease, or victims, or, maybe even, somebody that's in the profession, they're a counselor, therapist, psychologist, psychiatrist, and they're looking to gain more information. Maybe they're in school studying, right? Whatever the case may be. If my information can be useful in any way, I definitely want to offer it. And second, for me, it's about accountability. My ultimate goal is I'll get to a point where my journal that I keep of my successes and my failures, that I'll probably just do a video once a week, and this will be my accountability coach, meaning that it's one thing to journal our successes and our failures and review them. It's another to have an accountability coach, which means at that point, that the accountability coach is holding you accountable for those things, right? And that's what I'm going to use these videos for when I get there. And I'll be honest, I'm not that far. I don't prep or plan these videos really at all. Sometimes it's literally just spur of the moment. I'll be honest. Earlier today, I was like, is today the day that my videos are done? I have nothing else left to say, nothing else I can think of. You know what I mean? And then I thought it'd be important that I share a couple of my horror stories. When I say horror stories, horrors that I created, that I'm responsible for, things that I did. Now, for those with NPD, or even without, I know you hear me use the analogy a lot, of addiction, right? That a lot of things, it really can be very similar, to an addiction. Now, before I tell these stories, right, very important, right? The last thing you want to do, and of course, I'm a food addict, and I've had drug addiction, earlier in my years, so I'm very familiar, with the 12-step program, and I've sat in that seat. And it's very easy that you listen to somebody else tell their story. And when you hear what their rock bottom was, if you don't feel like yours was as bad, you're like, oh man, see, they were so effed up on drugs. Man, I can go back to using drugs. I wasn't that bad, right? No, you're an addict, right? And just because your rock bottom wasn't as bad as somebody else's doesn't make you not an addict. So here's the thing. If your behaviors were worse in your narcissistic, in your narcissism and your NPD, right? That doesn't mean I don't have it, and vice versa. If you're listening to my stories and you're like, well, I don't have stories that are that extreme, that doesn't mean you don't have it, right? If nothing else, the person who feels like their stories aren't as extreme, be thankful, right? So I'm gonna share a couple of stories, and these are gonna be things that my disorder, when I allowed it to control me, took so much. And I also want to be able to point out the sheer disgustingness of what drove these actions. So first, as far as situations, right? This is probably the worst one of my life. So my oldest was having some problems in school, and I was communicating back and forth with the school, and I came to find out that he had been lying to me. At that point, I'd been like arguing and fighting with the school, right, based upon what he had told me. So when you're a narcissist, right, at that point, this is a huge trigger, right? So I'm at the house, and at that point, there's distance between us, but I'm not just yelling, I'm not just screaming, I'm berating him in ways that I'm embarrassed to say. And the just plethora of filth that's coming out of my mouth is disgusting. And at no point was it in any way constructive. And I knew it wasn't constructive. It was all about me taking my insecurities about being exposed in that situation and just pushing it all out on him, right? Now, had he done wrong? Yes. Did there need to be repercussions? Yes. But I know in my soul that when I look back now, that's not what this was about. This was about me taking that shame and that guilt for, of course, from fighting with the principal and other people at the school, right? And being exposed as the person that was wrong. And now I had to make it just so terrible for my son. I had to take all that stuff that I had inside of me and try to make him feel the same way. So my ex, at one point, she's like, you know what, that's enough. And at that point, I verbally started abusing her, right? No, I'll tell you when it's enough. I do what I want when I want, right? And I went back to verbally abusing him, right? Now there was a countertop in between us, so that, there was no physical threat that I was going to become physically violent, right? But the verbal abuse was probably 1,000 times worse than any physical damage I could have done to this kid. And the ex just really just got to a point where it was more than she could handle, and so she got up and and again we're separated by the counter, and now we're just kind of going back and forth. Now everybody has their own versions of stories, and I am not lying when I say I 1,000% believe this is true, right? And I will tell you what can and can't be proved, right? So there was a soda can on the counter in between us. At that point, she says that I picked it up and I threw it at her, right? I believe I swiped my hand with the intent of hitting it, right? Hitting the soda can, right? And I am sure some soda got on her because it had soda in it, right? Where the truth lies, like I said, that's really two versions of every story, right? So at that point, she threatened to call the police, and I was like, go ahead and call them. What are they going to do? Come and arrest me for yelling in my house? So the state that I live in has several laws. One of those is if there's a domestic violence call, somebody has to be removed. So I was handcuffed and I was removed. Second, if you are arrested for domestic violence, you are not allowed to be released from jail until you see the judge. This happened Friday in the evening, so I was in jail over the weekend. Used my one phone call to call my mom, and I was like, hey, I need a huge favor. You got to call my employer, right? I'm gonna miss work on Monday. I'm supposed to work tomorrow, right? And so my boss, I ran my location, right? So my district manager, even though he got the call, he researched it. So he found out I had been arrested, found out what it was for. And again, like, I'm gonna take accountability, but he used it as a loophole to get me terminated, right? Basically stating that without me being the one to call 3 days in a row is a violation and termination, even though I had someone call on my behalf, right? But and long story short, so what did my disorder take away from me? Of course, I was arrested. I lost one of the greatest jobs I've ever had in my life. I love that job. I love that job. I did. And at that point, it didn't cost me my relationship, but it probably should have. My ex should have not have stayed in the relationship after that. Now, again, my son deserved to be disciplined. But I know in my heart of hearts, if you break it down into 100 increments, maybe 10 of the 100 were legitimate repercussions that he deserved. The other 90 was all about my inner rage being leashed and just swarmed upon him. And I have to take accountability that my verbal abuse is trauma. And not just on my ex, but my son that I was verbally abusing, as well as my 2 other children that were in the home that heard that. So me allowing my disorder to do whatever it wants abused my family, my 3 kids, and my ex. And I have to take responsibility for that. That can lead to psychological issues. I'm sure it has. And I have to be accountable. And I am. I understand if I had been in control of my disorder at that time, everything would have been different. Everything would have been different. And there's nothing I can do to change that. I have planned a meeting with my oldest son. We're going to sit down. I'm going to share my diagnosis with him. I want to allow him an opportunity to freely open and share anything that he has, and hopefully I'll be able to give him an explanation, not excuses. I will take full accountability for the damage I've caused that kid and the trauma I created in his life. The repercussions I've caused to his future. Because he deserves that. He didn't deserve to be treated the way I treated him. And he deserves to confront me and the things I've done and the way I've acted. And that's what I'm going to give him. I'm going to give him that opportunity. So, after the mother of my children and I separated, I I met the most phenomenal and amazing human being I've ever met in my life. And I shared a connection in a way that I've never shared with another human being ever. And even with my disorder, I felt things I just never felt with anybody. And this isn't going to sound like a whole lot when I tell you what I did, but it's such a metaphor for how I acted during the entire relationship. We hadn't been dating long, and we'd kind of met at like a mutual place where I was at one of my son's sporting events, and we were hanging out after. We were going to hang out afterwards. So we had both of our vehicles in that parking lot. And after, we were hanging out, we started to argue. And when we came back to the park, I don't even remember what the argument was about, but when we came back to the parking lot, where again, it's very tense. She was going to follow me, and when we came back and she got out of the car, I sped off. Now, after I got home, I had time to calm down a little bit, think everything through, and I reached out to her, giving her the impression that I thought she was behind me. And at that point, she's like, no, you sped off. You knew there was no way I was in my car. So my disorder sped off. And my disorder, I own and I control my disorder. So when I say my disorder, I was letting my disorder run my life. My disorder sped off. I let my disorder convince me that I did not speed off knowing that she wasn't behind me. But I can look back now that I've been diagnosed and I know who I am and I know what I am. There's a period from the time I hit that gas to at least 30 seconds, a minute, minute and a half, 2 minutes, that it was all about vengeance. It was all about being spiteful. And I lied to her. I was not honest with myself, and I was not honest with her. And I allowed that fight to escalate further, because then at that point we started arguing about whether or not I sped off, knowing she was going to be behind me or not. And again, all of this might not seem like the worst thing in the world, but when you look at it, it's a metaphor for so many situations like this. I allowed my disorder in that moment to take control and for me to dominate. And that's what the speeding off was about, me dominating and controlling. And then I allowed that disorder to lie to her. I wonder how much different that or so many other fights would have been if I would have been like, you know what, you're 110% correct. I put my foot on that gas because I was mad. I put my foot on that gas because I wanted vengeance. I wanted retaliation. I wanted to be in control. I wanted to do damage. And I'm sorry. If I had handled it like that, what would have happened? And again, it might not seem like the biggest thing in the world, but there were so many situations like that one, and it's So many situations like that one. And this might be the worst. Same amazing, phenomenal, awesome girl. So didn't deserve to be treated the way I treated her. So we were at a music festival, and the weather was bad. Kept being thunderstorms and lightning, and they'd evacuate us. And instead of, like, of course, completely evacuating, and you know, we got on a plane. We had traveled for this music festival, so we weren't at home. I mean, we were staying at an Airbnb that was like 45 minutes away from the venue. So they had evacuated us. And I had such anger and rage for the evacuation that I went into that mode where I'm just looking to fight for no reason. And again, I have no idea what the argument was about. I know it was about me not being able to deal with my own emotions, you know, being mad and upset at the music festival, evacuating, right? And you know, this isn't like they told us, hey, go home. This is hey, go hang out in the chairs. We might be able to bring you back once the weather's nice. And so you're talking about tens of thousands of people's like crowded in, you know, in these staircases, in the rain, trying to stay out of the rain. And again, I don't know what the actual argument was about, but we're arguing about something, and I stormed off, just walked off. I had little girls in. She's in a different state, right? I have the keys to the rental car. There's nowhere she can go. You know how scared she had to be? She didn't know if I'm coming back. She didn't. It had to be so scary for her. I can't even imagine. I can't imagine how scared she must have been. Why'd I do it? Why? Because I'm mad at the music festival, right? And I had control. I had all the power. I knew I did. I have the rental car. She has to come crawling and begging to me. She has to get down on her knees and beg. I don't mean literally, but she had, I mean figuratively. She had to crawl to me, and that's what I wanted. And I put her in that situation so I could feel inferior. So I could feel superior, make her feel inferior. Never deserved to be treated like that. Nobody does. She had to be so, I can only imagine how scared I knew. Right? I knew, if nothing else, she could at least beg me to like take her back to the Airbnb, you know what I mean? Or, you know, maybe she Ubers or whatever, but I mean, you know, 45-minute ride, I just... What it cost me. And that's one of the situations that cost me that relationship. That's the greatest relationship I've ever had in my life. If I live 1,000 years, I'll never meet another person anywhere even close to her. I'll never feel anything even close to what I felt with her, for her. And letting this disorder run my life and making terrible decisions cost me that relationship. I put her in physical harm. A music festival is filled with people. I mean, there's drugs, there's alcohol. It's the weather's terrible. I'm sure everybody knows. Like Woodstock '99. I mean, there's acts of violence all over the place. So I put her in physical harm. I emotionally harmed her. And why? Because I was mad at the music festival, and I had to try to feel better some way. And I did that at the cost of her mental stability. And there's other stories like that. Those are three of the biggest. I have this disorder. I take 100% responsibility, and I'm accountable. I allowed my disorder to make terrible decisions. I made terrible decisions because I have this disorder. For those of us that have this disorder, after sharing 3 of my terrible stories, so what now? If we can, we try to make amends. We try to give a sincere, heartfelt apology. Not that it's going to undo what we did. We try to find a way to forgive ourselves, right? Not justify, right? Forgive ourselves. Big difference, right? When you have this disorder, you're always looking to make excuses and not take accountability, right? Justification, right? That's why I don't want you to think that in any way, shape, or form, I say I did any of this because of the disorder. I was the one that allowed the disorder to run my life. So I am ultimately the one that's accountable. All right. So I'm not trying to use justification, right? We need to take accountability, but we do need to find a way to forgive ourselves. And then what do? We work with our therapist. We talk to them about it. We try to process it. We find ways to make sure things like that don't happen in the future, right? This journey is all about one thing: making the future better than the past. And we only do that by those steps we just talked about. Make sure you have a therapist. Make sure that you acknowledge you have this disorder, right? Make sure that you are committed to change and you're willing to embrace change. You want your future to be better than your past. You and your therapist put together a plan of emotional and mental growth towards wellness, right? We try to learn what our triggers are. We try to learn what this disorder wants, and we make sure that we don't feed it, we don't feed into it, right? And we take our lives back. There's nothing I can do to change the last 49 years. But I tell you what, if I live another 49, I can do everything in my capability to change those. I can make sure I never hurt anybody like I did those people before again. Make sure that I never hurt people in my future the way I hurt these people in my past. And for the people I've hurt in my past, make sure I never hurt them again. Some of these are no longer part of my present or future. They have to make their own decisions, right? I cost myself that relationship. That relationship's not part of my future anymore. I have to accept that. And I have to accept it's because of my actions. And I am. I take accountability. But I can't play the victim. I'm not a victim here. I'm not. I want my future to be better than my past. And if you want your future to be better than your past, get a therapist, work on the right things, make the commitments, right? Commit to the journey. It's a tough one. I hope it was helpful. Yeah. Man, nothing would make me happier than if there was somebody out there that had a situation like mine and I got to him first. Man, maybe that girl like mine is in your future. Maybe I'm the difference of whether or not you guys have a healthy relationship. Man, that's intense. I hope so. I really do. That ship sailed for me. But man, if I could do that for somebody else, that'd feel amazing. And that's one of the things that I try to do for myself. Instead of glory hounding and, trying to get other people to praise me or pity me, right? I try to get self-satisfaction, self-glorification, right? I try to give that to myself now. And right now that's a big one. That's a big one, knowing that maybe somebody listens to this and they can learn from me, and maybe my greatest loss becomes their greatest success. Man, that'd be awesome. Not gonna apologize for crying today. Maybe a couple of the other ones other videos I'll apologize for crying, but not today. I should apologize for not crying enough.